The poor young woman wept at the grave. Billionaire CEO. It's my wife's... Your story. The poor young woman wept at the grave. Billionaire CEO. It's my wife's... Your story? The autumn wind whispered through the cemetery, rustling fallen leaves across the freshly turned earth. Mia Matthews stood alone before the granite headstone, her dark hair dancing in the breeze. Her fingers traced the engraved letters of her grandmother's name. Sarah Matthews, beloved wife and mother. The funeral service had ended hours ago, but Mia couldn't bring herself to leave. Other mourners had drifted away in small groups, their black attire fading into the gathering dusk. Now it was just her and the silence. "I barely knew you," Mia whispered, her voice catching. She pulled her coat tighter against the chill. The bouquet of white roses she'd brought lay against the headstone, their petals already beginning to curl at the edges. Growing up, her grandmother had been like a shadow, present but somehow unreachable. Their interactions had been limited to occasional holiday visits and birthday cards containing crisp $20 bills. Mia remembered a quiet woman with kind eyes who seemed to carry an invisible weight on her shoulders. "Mom never talked about you much," Mia continued, kneeling to adjust the roses. "I always wondered why." The questions she'd never asked now felt like stones in her pocket, pulling her down with their weight. Why had there always been such distance between them? What secrets had her grandmother carried to her grave? Mia reached into her purse and pulled out a small sketchbook. Art had always been her way of processing emotions, and today was no different. Her fingers moved automatically across the paper, capturing the elegant lines of the headstone, the drape of roses, the way the evening light caught the polished granite. As she sketched, memories surfaced like bubbles in still water. The smell of fresh-baked cookies during rare childhood visits. The way her grandmother's hands would shake slightly as she poured tea. The sad smile that would cross her face when she looked at old photographs she never shared. "I wish I'd tried harder to know you," Mia admitted, her pencil stilling on the paper. "I wish I'd asked more questions." The wind picked up, sending a shower of golden leaves spiraling down around her. In the distance, a church bell tolled the hour. She thought about the few pieces of art her grandmother had hanging in her modest home. Beautiful landscapes and portraits that had always captured Mia's imagination as a child. She remembered asking about them once, but Sarah had quickly changed the subject, her eyes clouding with something that looked like pain. The sound of footsteps on grass broke through her reverie. Mia turned, expecting to see the groundskeeper coming to tell her the cemetery was closing. Instead, she found herself looking up at a tall man in an expensive black coat. His silver hair was perfectly styled, despite the wind, and his bearing spoke of wealth and authority. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, steel gray and filled with an emotion she couldn't quite read. He stood a respectful distance away, his gaze moving between Mia and the headstone. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. "Miss Matthews?" His voice was deep and cultured, carrying a weight of years and experience. "I'm Richard Matthews." The name sparked recognition in Mia's mind. She'd seen it in business magazines and news headlines. Richard Matthews, the billionaire CEO. But what was he doing here? "I apologize for interrupting your moment of grief," he continued, taking a careful step forward. "But I've been waiting for the right moment to speak with you." His eyes lingered on Sarah's name etched in stone, and something in his expression shifted, softened. "I don't understand," Mia said, rising slowly to her feet, her sketchbook clutched against her chest like a shield. "Did you know my grandmother?" Richard Matthews drew in a deep breath, his shoulders squaring as if bracing himself. "Yes, I knew Sarah very well." He paused, and when he spoke again, his words changed Mia's world forever. She was my wife, which means, Miss Matthews, that you are my granddaughter. Mia staggered backward, her sketchbook slipping from her fingers and hitting the damp grass. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as Richard Matthews' words echoed in her mind. Her grandmother, Sarah, had been his wife? That's impossible, she whispered, but even as the denial left her lips, pieces began falling into place. The expensive birthday gifts that had appeared like clockwork every year. The way her mother would change the subject whenever Mia asked about her grandmother's past. Richard bent down and retrieved her sketchbook, handling it with unexpected care. "You're an artist," he said softly, studying the sketch of the headstone before offering it back to her. "Like Sarah." Mia's hands trembled as she took the book. "I don't understand. If what you're saying is true, why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't she tell me?" Richard's expression clouded with sadness. "Sarah had her reasons for keeping our marriage private. She was—" He paused, searching for the right words. "A deeply complex woman who carried many burdens." The evening wind rustled through the cemetery trees, sending shadows dancing across Sarah's grave. Mia wrapped her arms around herself, feeling suddenly cold despite her coat. "Tell me about her," she found herself saying. "Please." Richard's stern features softened. "She worked as my housekeeper initially, but she was different from anyone I'd ever met. She saw beauty in everything, the way morning light hit the windows, how shadows played across the garden. She would sketch during her breaks, creating these incredible little glimpses of daily life." Mia's heart squeezed. How many times had she done the same thing, pulling out her sketchbook to capture fleeting moments? "We fell in love slowly," Richard continued, his voice growing distant with memory. "She resisted at first, worried about the difference in our social status. But Sarah had a way of making everyone around her feel seen, understood, even a lonely businessman like myself." "But why the secrecy?" Mia pressed. "Why stay hidden?" Richard's eyes met hers, and she saw pain there, old and deep. "Sarah believed that keeping our marriage private would protect the people she loved. She was—" He hesitated again, concerned about how certain revelations might affect her family. Mia thought about her mother, about the tension that had always existed between her and Sarah. There were clearly more layers to this story, depths she hadn't begun to understand. "There's something else you need to know," Richard said, reaching into his coat pocket. He withdrew an envelope, aged and slightly yellowed. "Sarah left something behind. Something significant." Mia took the envelope with unsteady hands. "What is it?" "Your grandmother was more than just an artist. She was a collector. Over the years, she assembled a rare and valuable collection of art, pieces that few people know exist." Richard's voice grew quieter. "She left it all to you, Mia." Her head snapped up. "What?" "The collection is hidden somewhere in the family estate. Sarah arranged it so that only you can find it." He gestured to the envelope. "This contains the first clue. She believed that your shared artistic sensibility would help you understand the path she laid out." Mia stared at the envelope in her hands, feeling its weight. Not just physical, but emotional. Her quiet, mysterious grandmother had left her an art collection? The same woman who had deflected questions about the paintings in her home had been a secret collector? "I know this is overwhelming," Richard said gently, "finding out about our connection, and now this inheritance. But Sarah was very specific about her wishes. She wanted you to have this legacy, Mia." The envelope felt warm against her palms, like it held not just paper but possibilities. Questions swirled in her mind. Why her? Why now? What other secrets had Sarah kept? "I don't know if I can handle this," Mia admitted, looking back at the grave. "It's all too much." "Sarah believed in you," Richard said quietly. "Perhaps it's time you discovered why." Mia's fingers trembled as she carefully opened the aged envelope Richard had given her. The paper felt delicate, like it might crumble under her touch. She pulled out a single sheet of cream-colored stationery, recognizing her grandmother's elegant handwriting immediately. "My dearest Mia, if you're reading this, then Richard has found you, and you now know a truth I've kept hidden for far too long. I'm sorry for the secrets, my darling girl. Sometimes we make choices thinking we're protecting the ones we love, only to realize too late that secrets can hurt more than honesty." Mia glanced up at Richard, who had stepped back to give her privacy, his tall figure casting a long shadow in the late afternoon light. She returned to the letter, her heart pounding. "Throughout my life, art has been my sanctuary, my voice when words failed me. What began as a passion grew into something more, a collection that tells not just my story, but the story of countless artists who poured their souls onto canvas and into clay. The collection is hidden within the Matthews estate, protected by a series of clues that only someone with an artist's eye and heart could understand. You, my dear Mia, have both in abundance. I've watched your talent bloom from afar, seeing in your work the same fire that burns in my own heart." Tears blurred Mia's vision, and she had to pause to wipe them away. Her grandmother had known about her art, had been watching her artistic journey all along. Your first clue lies in the place where light and shadow dance, where morning's first rays paint gold across marble. Look for the phoenix that rises not from flames, but from brushstrokes. What appears to be ending is merely beginning. The collection is yours, Mia, to do with as you see fit. But before you make any decisions, I ask that you take time to understand the story behind each piece. Art isn't just about beauty, it's about truth, pain, love, and the countless moments that make up a life. There are things you need to know about our family, about choices made long ago that still echo today. Richard will help you understand, if you let him. Trust him, Mia. Despite what others might say, he has always been a man of honor. Mia's hands were shaking so badly now that she could barely read the final lines. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you this in person. Know that my love for you has never wavered, even when distance kept us apart. You are more precious to me than any masterpiece. With all my love, Grandmother Sarah." The letter dropped to her lap as Mia struggled to process its contents. She looked up at Richard, who had been watching her with concern. "She knew about my art," Mia said softly. "All this time, she was watching." Richard nodded. "Sarah kept every newspaper clipping about your gallery showings, every mention of your work in local arts magazines. She was incredibly proud of you." "But why didn't she ever tell me?" The question came out more plaintive than Mia intended. "Why all the secrecy?" "Sarah believed she was protecting you from complications." Richard chose his words carefully. "The art world can be dangerous, Mia. Valuable collections attract attention, not all of it welcome." Mia looked down at the letter again, reading the clue about light and shadow, the phoenix rising from brush strokes. Her artist's mind was already trying to decode the imagery, even as her heart struggled with the emotional weight of it all. "The funeral home director needs to close up soon," Richard said gently. "Would you like me to drive you home?" Mia shook her head, carefully folding the letter and placing it back in its envelope. "No, thank you. I need time to think." She gathered her belongings, the sketchbook, her grandmother's letter, her tangled thoughts, and stood up. The funeral home's elegant interior suddenly felt stifling, its polished surfaces too bright, too perfect. As she walked toward the exit, Each step felt heavy with the weight of revelation. Her grandmother, the quiet woman who had lived such a seemingly simple life, had been carrying such extraordinary secrets. An art collection valuable enough to require protection. A hidden marriage to a billionaire. A lifetime of watching her granddaughter from afar, collecting pieces of her story like precious artifacts. The questions multiplied with every step. What was she supposed to do with this inheritance? What were the complications Richard had hinted at? And most importantly, why had Sarah chosen to reveal everything only after she was gone? The drive to her mother's modest suburban home felt surreal. Mia's fingers drummed nervously on the steering wheel as streetlights cast intermittent shadows across her face. The letter from her grandmother sat heavy in her purse, like a stone weighing down her thoughts. Her mother's house looked exactly as it always had. The small garden with its neat rows of petunias, the wind chimes her father had hung years ago still tinkling in the evening breeze. Mia sat in her car for several long moments, gathering her courage. Inside, Ellen Matthews was preparing dinner, the familiar scent of her signature lasagna filling the kitchen. She looked up as Mia entered, her face softening with concern at her daughter's troubled expression. "I wasn't expecting you tonight," Ellen said, wiping her hands on her apron. "How was the—" She paused, seemingly unable to say the word funeral. Mia settled onto one of the kitchen stools, her fingers tracing patterns on the worn countertop. "Mom, something happened at the funeral. Something unexpected." Ellen's hand stilled on the dish she was preparing. "What do you mean?" "I met someone there. Richard Matthews." Mia watched her mother carefully, noting how she tensed at the name. "He told me about grandmother Sarah, about their marriage." The glass bowl Ellen was holding clattered against the counter. "What?" "He says she was his wife. That makes him my grandfather." Mia pulled the letter from her purse, holding it like a shield. "Grandmother Sarah left me a letter. There's an art collection, apparently, and—" "Stop!" Ellen's voice was sharp, her face drained of color. "Just stop right there. Mom, please, I need to understand what's going on. Why didn't anyone tell me about this?" Ellen braced herself against the counter, her knuckles white. "Richard Matthews is a manipulator, a man who uses his money and influence to get whatever he wants." "But he seemed genuine." "Of course he did." Ellen's voice rose. "That's what men like him do. They seem genuine, caring, trustworthy, until they destroy everything around them." Mia flinched at her mother's vehemence. "What happened? What did he do?" "Your grandmother worked as his housekeeper. That's all." Ellen's words were clipped, angry. "Any other story he's telling you is a lie. A way to get his hands on whatever he thinks Sarah might have left behind." "But the letter— I don't care what that letter says!" Ellen slammed her palm against the counter, making Mia jump. "That man destroyed our family once before. I won't let him do it again." Mia stood up, her own anger rising to match her mother's. "I'm not a child anymore. Mom, I deserve to know the truth." "The truth?" Ellen laughed bitterly. "The truth is that Richard Matthews cares about nothing except his own interests. He's using you, Mia, using this supposed art collection to draw you in, just like he—" She stopped abruptly, turning away. "Just like he what?" Mia pressed. "Stay away from him," Ellen said, her voice now eerily calm. "Whatever he's offering you, money, connections, answers, it's not worth it. Promise me you'll stay away." Mia looked down at the letter in her hands, thinking of her grandmother's words about trust and honor. The clues to the art collection seemed to burn through the paper, calling to her artistic soul. "I can't promise that," she said quietly. Ellen whirled around, her eyes blazing. "You don't understand what you're getting into. That man will manipulate you, use your talent, your kindness against you, just like he did with Sarah and—" She cut herself off again, but this time Mia caught a glimpse of old pain in her eyes. "Mom, please, help me understand." "No." Ellen's voice was final. "If you pursue this, if you let Richard Matthews into your life, you're making a terrible mistake, and I won't be able to protect you from the consequences." The lasagna in the oven began to smoke, filling the kitchen with the acrid smell of burning cheese. But neither woman moved to save it, locked in a standoff of secrets and silence. Mia's beaten-up Honda Civic looked woefully out of place as she pulled up to the wrought iron gates of the Matthews estate. She double-checked the address Richard had texted her, though there was no mistaking the sprawling mansion that lay beyond. Her hands trembled slightly as she pressed the intercom button. "Yes?" A crisp voice crackled through the speaker. "I'm Mia Matthews. I have an appointment with Richard Matthews." The gates swung open silently, and Mia drove up the winding driveway lined with perfectly manicured topiaries. Her mother's warnings echoed in her mind, but curiosity pushed her forward. The mansion loomed before her, a masterpiece of architecture with its stone facade and soaring columns. Mia parked beside a fountain featuring marble angels, feeling increasingly aware of her worn jeans and paint-stained sweater. A butler greeted her at the massive front doors. "Miss Matthews, Mr. Matthews is expecting you. Please follow me." Mia's footsteps echoed on the marble floors as she followed him through the grand entrance hall. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across the walls, and priceless artwork adorned every surface. She recognized several pieces from her art history classes, originals, not prints. "Your grandmother helped choose many of these pieces," the butler mentioned, noticing her interest. She had quite an eye for art. Before Mia could respond, Richard appeared at the top of the sweeping staircase. He'd traded his funeral suit for a more casual blazer and slacks, but his presence was no less commanding. "Mia, thank you for coming." He descended the stairs, his smile genuine but tinged with something she couldn't quite read. "I hope you'll forgive the grandeur. Sarah always said it was too much." Mia managed a small laugh. "It's overwhelming." "Come," Richard gestured. "There's something I want to show you." They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly, each room more luxurious than the last. Richard pointed out various artifacts and artwork, sharing brief stories about their acquisition. Mia noticed how he seemed to soften when mentioning Sarah's involvement in these purchases. "Your grandmother," he said, pausing before a closed door, "had a particular fondness for this next piece. It was the first artwork we bought together." He produced an old-fashioned key and unlocked the door, revealing a smaller, more intimate room. Unlike the rest of the mansion's opulent display, this space felt personal, lived in. A single painting hung on the far wall, illuminated by carefully positioned lights. Mia's breath caught in her throat. It was a Monet, an original she'd only ever seen in textbooks. The artist's signature water lilies floated dreamily across the canvas, their colors somehow both vibrant and delicate. "Sarah used to sit here for hours," Richard said softly, watching Mia's reaction. "She said it reminded her of her sister Lily, both the name and the feeling of peace it conveyed." Mia stepped closer to the painting, drawn by its ethereal beauty. She could almost feel her grandmother's presence in the room, could imagine her finding solace in these brushstrokes. "The day we bought this," Richard continued, his voice thick with memory, "was the day Sarah agreed to marry me. She said anyone who could understand the value of such beauty must have a good soul." He gave a short, pained laugh. "I'm not sure she was right about that." Mia turned to look at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. The confident businessman was gone, replaced by someone who seemed lost in the past. She never told me, Mia said quietly. About any of this. About you. No, she wouldn't have. Richard touched the frame of the painting gently. Sarah kept her secrets close. But she left clues, in the art, in the spaces between things. That's why you're here, Mia. You have her eye. You see what others miss. Standing there, surrounded by the evidence of her grandmother's hidden life, Mia felt something shift inside her. The art spoke to her in a language she understood, bridging the gap between her world and Sarah's. Whatever reasons her grandmother had for keeping these secrets, they were wrapped up in beauty and mystery, waiting to be uncovered. Richard's hand hesitated on an ornate brass doorknob, its surface dulled with age. This wing, he said softly, hasn't been opened since Sarah. He didn't finish the sentence, but Mia understood. The door creaked open, revealing a corridor that felt frozen in time. Dust motes danced in shafts of afternoon light streaming through tall windows. Heavy velvet curtains, faded to a muted burgundy, hung still and silent. Sarah claimed this entire section as her personal space, Richard explained, his voice barely above a whisper. I never questioned it. Everyone needs their sanctuary. They passed several closed doors, their brass handles matching the first. The wallpaper here was different from the rest of the mansion. Softer, with delicate flowers that reminded Mia of an English garden. Her fingers traced the pattern as she walked. Your grandmother picked this herself. Richard noticed her interest. She said it reminded her of the gardens she used to tend before. He cleared his throat. Before everything changed. At the end of the hall, double doors opened into a spacious room that took Mia's breath away. Tall windows stretched from floor to ceiling, their glass clouded with years of dust, but still allowing natural light to flood the space. Sheets draped various pieces of furniture like ghosts, and easels stood in corners, their wooden frames worn with use. This was her studio, Richard said, moving to pull back one of the sheets. A comfortable-looking armchair emerged, its upholstery still rich despite the years. She would spend hours here, especially in the afternoons when the light was best. Mia walked slowly around the room, her artist's eye taking in every detail. A large desk sat beneath one window, its surface covered in a fine layer of dust. Half-used tubes of paint lay scattered across it, dried and forgotten. She picked one up, reading the label. The brand was expensive, professional grade. She never showed her work to anyone, Richard continued, watching Mia explore. I asked once, but she said some things were meant to be private. I respected that, though I always wondered. Mia's attention was drawn to the walls. Unlike the rest of the mansion with its perfectly arranged artwork, these walls held nothing. But there were marks, lighter patches where pictures had once hung, hooks that now held nothing. Did she take her paintings down? Mia asked, running her hand along one empty space. Richard shook his head. One day, they were simply gone. She never explained, and I never pressed. Sarah had her reasons for everything she did. As Mia moved along the wall, her fingers caught on something, a slight irregularity in the wooden paneling. She pressed gently, and to her surprise, a small section of the wall clicked and swung open. Richard stepped forward, clearly as surprised as she was. I had no idea. Inside the hidden compartment, Mia found stacks of sketchbooks, their pages yellowed with age. More art supplies were carefully arranged, brushes, pencils, charcoal sticks. But what caught her eye were the loose sketches, dozens of them, tucked between the books. With trembling hands, Mia pulled one out. The drawing was beautiful, a woman sitting in a garden, her face turned away, but her posture suggesting deep thought. The style was confident, skilled, showing years of practice. These are amazing, Mia breathed, carefully examining another sketch. This one showed a child playing near a fountain, the same fountain she'd passed on her way in. "I never knew," Richard said quietly, looking over her shoulder. "All these years, and I never knew she was this talented." Mia sat cross-legged on the floor, reverently spreading out the sketches around her. Each one revealed another layer of her grandmother's skill, another glimpse into how she saw the world. There were studies of hands, of faces, of flowers and trees. Some were quick gesture drawings, others carefully rendered portraits. "She was an artist," Mia said, her voice thick with emotion. "A real artist." She understood now why the inheritance included an art collection. Sarah hadn't just been a collector. She'd been a creator, someone who lived and breathed art, just as Mia did. "Like grandmother, like granddaughter," Richard murmured, watching as Mia continued to discover more of Sarah's hidden talent. Mia carefully lifted another sketchbook from the hidden compartment, its leather cover soft and worn beneath her fingers. Richard sat in Sarah's old armchair, watching with a mix of wonder and melancholy, as Mia discovered more of her grandmother's hidden talents. "I can't believe how much of her life I never knew," Mia said, settling onto the dusty floor. She opened the sketchbook, revealing pages filled with quick studies of people going about their daily lives. "These look like they're from a hotel or something?" Richard leaned forward, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "The Grand Plaza Hotel. That's where I first met Sarah." His voice softened with the memory. "She was working as a housekeeper there, always carrying this little notebook with her. I never realized she was sketching during her breaks." Mia looked up, surprised. "A housekeeper? But I thought—" She trailed off, embarrassed by her assumption that her grandmother had come from wealth, that she was from my social circle. Richard's laugh was gentle. "No, Sarah came from very humble beginnings. She worked 2 jobs to support herself and her sister, Lily. The hotel during the day, and she cleaned offices at night." Mia turned another page, finding a detailed drawing of a younger Richard sitting in what appeared to be the hotel's lobby. The skill in capturing his likeness was remarkable. "She drew you," she said softly. "Did she?" Richard moved to sit beside her on the floor, despite his expensive suit. His eyes widened at the sketch. "I had no idea. This must have been right after I started staying at the hotel for business trips. I was there every other week for nearly 6 months." "How did you two—" Mia hesitated, not sure if she should pry. "Fall in love?" Richard smiled, but there was a shadow in his eyes. "It wasn't some grand romance at first. Sarah would bring fresh towels to my room and we'd talk. Just simple conversations about art, books, life. She had this way of seeing beauty in everything, even the most ordinary moments." Mia flipped through more pages, finding sketches of hotel guests, staff members, and countless small details of daily life. She really captured people's essence. "That was Sarah's gift," Richard agreed. "Not just in her art, but in life. She could see past people's facades to who they really were." He picked up one of the loose sketches, a study of hands folding laundry. "She never let wealth or status define anyone's worth. Even after we married, she insisted on making our bed herself every morning." "That must have been quite a change for her," Mia said, trying to imagine her grandmother's transition from housekeeper to wealthy wife. "She handled it with incredible grace," Richard said, his voice warm with admiration. "Though she never really embraced the social scene. She preferred quiet evenings at home, working on her art or tending to her garden." He gestured around the studio. "This room was my wedding gift to her, a space that was entirely her own." Mia found herself studying Richard's face as he spoke about Sarah. The tenderness in his expression, the way his voice softened when he shared these memories, it didn't match the manipulative figure her mother had warned her about. This was a man who had truly loved her grandmother. "What was she like?" Mia asked, hungry for more details. "As a person, I mean. We barely saw her when I was growing up." Richard was quiet for a moment, collecting his thoughts. "She was complex, incredibly kind, but also very private. She had this inner strength that came from years of taking care of others. But there was also a sadness in her sometimes, especially when she talked about family." Mia thought about her mother's angry reaction to Richard, wondering how much of the family history she didn't know. The man sitting beside her, sharing these intimate memories of her grandmother, seemed genuine in his grief and his desire to connect with her. "Thank you," she said suddenly, making Richard look up. "For sharing all this with me, for helping me know her better." Richard's smile was warm and surprisingly vulnerable. "Thank you for wanting to know. Sarah would have loved that you're an artist too. She would have loved sharing this space with you." As they continued looking through Sarah's art supplies and sketches, Mia felt something shift inside her. The wealthy stranger from the funeral was becoming real to her. A grieving husband, a man who had loved her grandmother, someone who might help her understand her own place in this complicated family history. The morning sun streamed through the mansion's tall windows as Mia studied another of Sarah's sketches. She'd spent hours in the studio, losing herself in her grandmother's artwork, when angry voices echoed from downstairs. "Where is she? Where's my daughter?" Mia's stomach dropped at the sound of her mother's voice. She set down the sketchbook and hurried to the grand staircase, her footsteps quickening as the voices grew louder. "Mrs. Matthews, please!" That was Richard's measured tone, trying to maintain calm. "Don't you dare Mrs. Matthews me!" Her mother stood in the foyer, her face flushed with anger. When she spotted Mia on the stairs, her eyes narrowed. "Get down here right now." Mia descended slowly, feeling like a child caught doing something wrong. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "What am I doing here? What are you doing here?" Her mother's voice shook. "I told you to stay away from him. I warned you about this man." Richard stood to the side, his usual composed demeanor strained. "Perhaps we should all sit down and discuss this calmly." "Calmly?" Her mother laughed bitterly. "Like how calmly you swooped in at my mother's funeral to manipulate my daughter. How many days did you wait? 1, 2? "Mom, stop it." Mia reached the bottom of the stairs. "Richard's not manipulating me. He's been showing me Sarah's art studio, telling me about her life." "Her life?" Her mother's voice cracked. "What do you know about her life? She abandoned us. She chose this." She gestured wildly at the mansion's opulent interior, over her own family. "That's not true," Richard said quietly. "Sarah never abandoned anyone. She tried to reach out many times." "Don't you dare tell me about my own mother!" Mia's mother whirled on him. "You have no right. You think I don't know what this is about? The inheritance? Using my daughter to get your hands on whatever my mother left behind?" Mia stepped between them. "Mom, please. This isn't about money. I'm trying to understand who Sarah was." "Who she was?" Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "She was my mother who disappeared into this world of wealth and privilege and forgot about us, who sent checks instead of visiting, who missed every important moment of my life because she was too busy playing the perfect wife to him." She jabbed a finger at Richard. Richard's face paled. "Your mother loved you more than anything. She spoke of you every day. Then why didn't she come home?" The words burst out of her mother like a dam breaking. "Why didn't she ever explain? Why did she leave us with nothing but questions and silence?" Mia felt tears stinging her own eyes. "Mom? And now you're falling for the same trap." Her mother grabbed Mia's arm. "Can't you see what he's doing? Using Sarah's memory, this art collection, all of it. It's just another way to control our family." "That's enough." Richard's voice was firm, but not unkind. I understand you're hurting, but Sarah made her choices for reasons you don't fully understand. And Mia has every right to learn about her grandmother's life. Her life? Her mother's grip tightened on Mia's arm. What about our lives? The ones she left behind? Did she tell you about that, Richard? Did she tell you about the birthdays she missed? The school plays she never attended? The graduations she couldn't make time for? Mia stood frozen between them, torn between her mother's raw pain and Richard's quiet grief. Everything she'd learned about Sarah in the past few days seemed to shift and blur, taking on new shadows, new questions. I think, her mother said, her voice dropping to a dangerous quiet, that you need to come home now, Mia, before you get pulled into whatever game he's playing. It's not a game, Mia whispered, but uncertainty crept into her voice. She looked at Richard, saw the pain in his eyes, and then back at her mother's tear-stained face. Choose carefully, Mia, her mother said. Some inheritances come with too high a price. After her mother's explosive visit, Mia couldn't bear to leave the mansion just yet. She needed answers, not more questions. The hidden room in Sarah's wing called to her, promising secrets in its dusty corners. Sunlight filtered through heavy curtains as Mia pulled open another drawer in Sarah's antique desk. Her fingers brushed against a leather-bound album, its spine cracking as she opened it. Black and white photographs spilled onto her lap. 3 young people smiled up at her from the first photo. Sarah looking shy but beautiful in a simple dress. Richard, younger and more carefree than she'd ever seen him, and between them, a woman who took Mia's breath away. She had Sarah's features, but with a wild, artistic energy that seemed to leap from the photograph. Lily, Mia whispered, recognizing her great-aunt from her mother's rare mentions. Sarah's sister, the artist who'd died young, or so the family story went. More photos followed, Lily painting at an easel while Richard watched from nearby, his expression unguarded and full of something Mia couldn't quite name. Sarah in the background, always slightly apart, always watching. The 3 of them at parties, picnics, gallery openings, but in every shot, Mia noticed the same pattern, Richard's eyes following Lily, while Sarah's eyes followed Richard. Behind the album, Mia found a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. Her hands trembled as she untied it. The first letter was from Lily to Sarah. Dearest Sarah, I can't keep pretending. Every time he looks at me, I feel like I'm betraying you. But I can't help how I feel, and I think he feels it too. What am I supposed to do? He's your husband now. I'm leaving for Paris next week. It's better this way. Love always, Lily. Mia's heart pounded as she read letter after letter. Most were from Lily to Sarah, spanning years. They painted a picture of unspoken love, guilty glances, and the weight of loyalty that kept everyone silent. Richard appeared in every letter, a shadow between the sisters. A photograph slipped from between the pages, Lily alone this time, standing in front of the mansion. On the back, in Richard's handwriting, the one I couldn't have. I see you found them. Mia jumped. Richard stood in the doorway, looking older than she'd ever seen him. She held up the photograph. You were in love with her. With Lily. He crossed the room slowly, taking the photo from her hands. Yes. His voice was rough with emotion. From the moment I met her. But you married Sarah. I did. He sank into an armchair, still staring at Lily's image. Your grandmother. She was kind, steady, everything I thought I should want. My parents approved, her parents approved. It made sense. But you loved Lily. More than I thought possible. Richard's fingers traced Lily's face in the photograph. She was like a flame. Bright, untamable. She saw the world differently. Made everyone around her see it differently too. Why didn't you tell her? Because of Sarah. He looked up at Mia, his eyes filled with decades of regret. Sarah loved me, truly loved me. Lily knew that. I knew that. We couldn't hurt her. So Lily left for Paris, and I married Sarah, and we all pretended it was what we wanted. That's why my grandmother kept so many secrets, Mia said softly. She was protecting everyone. She knew, of course. Sarah always knew. Richard's voice cracked. She never said a word, just loved me anyway, kept every letter, every photograph. Maybe it was her way of keeping us all together, even when we were apart. Mia looked down at the scattered letters, the faces frozen in time. 3 young people caught in a web of love and loyalty, their choices echoing through generations. Did Lily ever come back? No. Richard carefully set the photograph down. She died in Paris 10 years later, never married. Sarah received the news first. She's the one who told me. I've always wondered if Lily felt the same way I did. If she left because she couldn't bear to see me with Sarah, or if I'd imagined the whole thing. These letters, Mia held them up, say you didn't imagine it. She loved you too. Richard closed his eyes, decades of buried pain rising to the surface. Sometimes I think your grandmother collected all of this, the letters, the photos, the paintings, not just to remember but to show someone someday, to help them understand why we all made the choices we did. Richard's hands shook as he picked up another photograph from the scattered collection. This one showed all 3 of them, Sarah, Lily, and himself, at what appeared to be a summer garden party. They were young, beautiful, and smiling, but now Mia could see the tension hidden beneath those smiles. Your grandmother, Richard said, his voice thick with emotion. She had this way of making everything seem perfect on the surface. Even when her heart was breaking, she'd smile and make sure everyone else was comfortable. Mia settled into the chair across from him, drawing her knees up to her chest. The evening light filtered through the study's heavy curtains, casting long shadows across the Persian rug. Did you ever think about telling Lily? Before the wedding? Richard's laugh was hollow. Every day, every single day, he ran a hand through his silver hair. There was this moment at the engagement party. Lily was helping Sarah with her dress in the powder room. I was waiting in the hallway, and when Lily came out, he trailed off, lost in the memory. What happened? Mia prompted gently. She looked at me, and I looked at her, and everything I wanted to say was right there on the tip of my tongue. But then Sarah came out, radiant and happy, and Lily just smiled that brave smile of hers and walked away. Mia picked up one of Lily's letters, noting the passionate, slanted handwriting. She seemed so alive in these letters, so full of emotion. That was Lily, Richard nodded, his eyes distant. She painted like that too, bold strokes, vibrant colors. She couldn't hide what she felt, not really. Not like Sarah and me. He gestured to the room around them. We built this perfect life, this beautiful cage, while Lily was out there living honestly, even if it meant being alone. A particular letter caught Mia's attention. The paper was tear-stained, the ink slightly smudged. She writes here about a night in the garden, about moonlight and music. Richard closed his eyes, pain etching deeper lines into his face. Sarah's birthday celebration. We had dancers, musicians, everyone who was anyone in town came. But I only saw Lily that night. She was wearing this blue dress that matched her eyes, and when she danced... He swallowed hard. I almost told her then, almost ruined everything. What stopped you? Sarah came to find me. She put her hand in mine, so trusting, so loving, and I saw Lily watching us. The look on her face. Richard's voice cracked. She left for Paris the next week. No goodbyes, just a note for Sarah saying she needed to pursue her art. Mia sat quietly, letting the weight of his words settle. She thought about Sarah, her grandmother, living all those years knowing her husband loved her sister, keeping their letters, their photographs, preserving this painful love story like pressed flowers between pages. "I think," Mia said slowly, "maybe Sarah kept all of this because she loved you both too much to let either of you go. Even if she couldn't have all of your heart, she wanted to keep the parts that belonged to Lily safe too." Richard looked up sharply, his eyes wet. "You sound just like her." Sarah had that same way of seeing through to the truth of things. He picked up another photograph. Sarah in her wedding dress. Beautiful, but somehow distant. "I did love her, you know. Maybe not the way she deserved, but I tried to be a good husband." "She must have loved you very much," Mia said softly, "to accept all of this, to protect everyone's hearts even when it hurt her own." "The irony is," Richard said, carefully returning the wedding photo to the pile, "I never knew if Lily truly loved me back. I spent decades wondering if I'd imagined it all, if I'd thrown away my chance at telling her for nothing." "These letters," Mia gestured to the scattered papers, "they prove you didn't imagine it. She loved you just as much as you loved her." The revelation seemed to age Richard before her eyes. He slumped in his chair, decades of uncertainty finally giving way to a different kind of pain. The pain of knowing what might have been. Mia's fingers traced the worn leather spine of the journal she'd found tucked behind a loose panel in Sarah's old writing desk. The morning sun streamed through the study's tall windows, dust motes dancing in the golden light. Her heart raced as she carefully opened the delicate book, its pages yellowed with age. "I never knew she kept a journal," she whispered to herself, settling into the window seat where Sarah must have spent countless hours writing. The first few entries were mundane: household accounts, appointments, notes about garden plantings. But as Mia turned the pages, she noticed a shift. The handwriting became more hurried, more secretive. Numbers appeared in the margins, coordinates perhaps, or measurements. Sketches of what looked like architectural details filled entire pages. "Third floor, north wing, count 17 steps from the cherub statue," Mia read aloud, her brow furrowing. "Look for the rose that never blooms." She glanced up at the ornate ceiling, where carved roses dotted the crown molding. Standing, Mia walked to Sarah's desk again. She ran her hands along its smooth surface, remembering how Richard had mentioned Sarah spent hours here, supposedly writing letters. But now Mia wondered if her grandmother had been doing something else entirely. Planning, mapping, hiding. The journal entries grew more cryptic as she read on. "When the sun touches the western window at 4, shadows will point the way. Remember the story of the princess who hid her treasures in plain sight." Mia grabbed her phone, snapping pictures of the most detailed pages. Her hands trembled slightly as she photographed a particularly intricate drawing of what appeared to be the mansion's 3rd floor. Sarah had marked certain spots with tiny X's, adding notes in her precise handwriting. "Check the hollow spaces," and "remember the false wall." "What were you trying to tell us, Grandma?" Mia murmured, turning another page. A loose photograph fluttered to the floor. Mia picked it up carefully. It showed Sarah standing in front of an easel, paintbrush in hand, her face lit with a joy Mia had never seen in family photos. The painting on the easel was only partially visible, but Mia could make out bold, vibrant colors, so different from the reserved woman she'd known. Back in the journal, she found an entry dated just months before Sarah's death. "The art speaks of things I could never say aloud. Each piece holds a piece of my heart, my truth. When the time comes, the right eyes will see what needs to be seen. Follow the roses, count the steps, trust the shadows." Mia pulled out her sketchbook and began making notes. She drew a rough layout of the 3rd floor, marking the locations Sarah had mentioned. The cherub statue, the western window, The mysterious rose that never bloomed. They had to be connected somehow. She stood and walked to the window, watching as clouds drifted across the morning sky. The mansion's reflection in the garden pond caught her eye, the way the image distorted and shifted with each ripple. Something Sarah had written clicked into place. Truth, like art, changes depending on how you look at it. Returning to the desk, Mia spread out the journal pages containing drawings. When she arranged them in chronological order, she noticed something she hadn't before: tiny dots in the corners of certain pages. Connected, they seemed to form a pattern. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother asking when she'd be home. Mia ignored it, too engrossed in her discovery. She held one of the pages up to the light, and her breath caught as she saw faint lines connecting the dots, visible only when backlit. "You were an artist?" she said softly, touching one of Sarah's sketches. "Not just a wife, not just a grandmother. You were an artist hiding in plain sight, just like your collection." The weight of this revelation settled over her. Every cryptic note, every careful drawing. They weren't just clues to find the art collection. They were breadcrumbs Sarah had left, leading not just to paintings but to understanding who she really was. Mia spread Sarah's journal pages across Richard's mahogany desk, her fingers tracing the cryptic notes. The morning light streamed through the study's tall windows, casting long shadows across the antique furniture. Richard stood by the fireplace, his reflection wavering in the ornate mirror above it. "These coordinates," Mia said, tapping one of the sketches. "They're clearly pointing to something in the north wing. If we just—" "Mia," Richard interrupted, his voice tight. "Perhaps we should take a step back. This obsession with finding the collection. It's becoming concerning." She looked up sharply. "Obsession? I'm trying to understand my grandmother's legacy. Isn't that what you wanted?" "Your grandmother's legacy isn't about monetary value." Richard's fingers drummed against the mantelpiece. Sarah was more than her possessions. "Don't patronize me," Mia snapped, gathering the papers closer. "I'm not some fortune hunter. These journals, these sketches, they're showing me a side of her I never knew existed." Richard moved away from the fireplace, his expensive shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. "And what about the side of her I knew? The woman who cared more about creating beauty than possessing it? Is that why you're really here?" Mia's voice grew cold. "To control how I see her? To make sure I only know the version you want me to know?" "That's absurd." Richard's face flushed. "I've only tried to help you understand." "Understand what? The convenient parts?" Mia stood, her chair scraping back. "You show up at her funeral, drop this bombshell about being my grandfather, dangle this inheritance in front of me." "I never dangled anything," Richard cut in, his usual composure cracking. "I wanted to honor Sarah's wishes, to connect with my granddaughter." "Really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're using me to find something you couldn't find yourself." Mia's hands shook as she gathered Sarah's journal. "Maybe that's why you married her instead of Lily, because Sarah was easier to control." The moment the words left her mouth, she knew she'd gone too far. Richard's face went pale, his jaw tightening. "You have no right," he said quietly, dangerously, "to make assumptions about my marriage or my feelings for either Sarah or Lily." "And you have no right to question my motives," Mia shot back. "I'm not some pawn in whatever game you're playing. I'm trying to understand who my grandmother really was." "By reducing her life to a treasure hunt?" Richard's voice rose. "By assuming everything she valued must be hidden away in some secret room?" "At least I'm looking. What have you done except drop cryptic hints and judge my every move?" Mia stuffed the journal into her bag. "Maybe you're afraid of what I'll find. Maybe there's more to this story than you want me to know." Richard stepped forward, his expression thunderous. "I loved your grandmother, Mia. Everything I've done has been to protect her memory. Protect it or control it? Mia slung her bag over her shoulder. I'm starting to think my mother was right about you. Your mother? Richard laughed bitterly. The woman who kept you from knowing your own grandmother? Who's really controlling the narrative here? Mia felt tears pricking at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. At least she never pretended to be something she wasn't. You show up playing the devoted widower, but you were in love with someone else the whole time. You have no idea what you're talking about. Richard's voice was quiet now, almost dangerous. No idea of the complexities. Save it, Mia cut him off. I don't need your permission to search for the truth, and I don't need your version of who my grandmother was. She turned and strode toward the door, her footsteps echoing in the suddenly silent room. As she reached for the handle, Richard spoke one last time. Mia, please, don't let anger cloud your judgment. Sarah wouldn't have wanted— Don't tell me what she would have wanted, Mia said without turning around. You didn't know her as well as you think you did. None of us did. She pulled the door open and walked out, letting it slam behind her. The sound echoed through the grand hallway like a gunshot, but she didn't look back. Her heart pounded as she made her way through the mansion's ornate corridors, past the watching portraits and gleaming artifacts that suddenly seemed more like prison bars than treasures. Mia sat cross-legged on her apartment floor, surrounded by the few mementos she had of Sarah. Her grandmother's journal lay open in her lap, its pages worn and soft from years of use. Afternoon light filtered through her small window, casting a gentle glow on the scattered photographs and letters. I didn't even know you, she whispered, touching a photo of Sarah standing in front of an easel. The image was faded, but her grandmother's smile was clear, bright and genuine, her eyes focused on whatever she was painting. The canvas in the photo was turned away from the camera, like so many of Sarah's secrets. Mia picked up one of Sarah's sketches she'd taken from the mansion. The lines were confident, flowing across the paper with a grace that spoke of years of practice. How had she never known this side of her grandmother? An accomplished artist who'd hidden her talent away, just as she'd hidden her marriage to Richard. Her earlier argument with Richard played through her mind, making her wince. She'd been harsh, letting her frustration and confusion spill out in angry words. But wasn't there truth in what she'd said? The wealth, the mansion, the mysterious art collection? It all felt like an elaborate game of hide-and-seek. Mia stood up, stretching her stiff muscles, and walked to her own easel in the corner. Her latest painting sat unfinished, the colors still wet in places. It was different from her usual style, darker, more complex, like her emotions these past few weeks. What were you trying to tell me? She asked the empty room, thinking of Sarah's cryptic notes about the collection. Each clue seemed to lead to another question, another layer of mystery. But maybe she'd been looking at it wrong. Maybe the collection itself wasn't the point. She picked up Sarah's journal again, this time reading not for clues about hidden treasures, but for glimpses of the woman herself. The entries spoke of quiet moments, of joy found in creating beauty, of love expressed through art rather than words. One particular passage caught her eye. Art isn't about possession. It's about the moment of creation, when your soul speaks through your hands. Everything else is just aftermath. Mia sat heavily on her bed, the journal clutched to her chest. She'd been so focused on finding the collection, she'd missed the real treasure, understanding the woman who'd created it. Sarah hadn't hidden her art because she was ashamed or secretive. She'd hidden it because the art itself wasn't what mattered to her. Looking around her small apartment, Mia saw her own art with new eyes. Half-finished canvases leaned against walls, sketches pinned everywhere, paint tubes scattered across surfaces. She created because she had to, because art was how she processed the world, just like Sarah had. "I get it now," she said softly, running her fingers over her grandmother's handwriting. "The collection isn't about money or status. It's about passion, about living a life true to yourself, even if nobody else sees it." She thought of Richard, of his complicated history with Sarah and Lily. He'd been trying to tell her something similar, hadn't he? That Sarah was more than her possessions, more than the secrets she'd kept. She was an artist who'd found joy in creation, regardless of who saw her work. Mia gathered the journal and photographs, carefully placing them in her bag. The anger from her argument with Richard had faded, replaced by a new understanding. She needed to go back, not to search for hidden wealth, but to truly know the woman who'd created it all. Standing at her apartment door, Mia paused. The late afternoon sun caught the dust motes in the air, making them dance like tiny stars. Her grandmother had seen beauty in moments like this, had captured them in her hidden works. It was time to honor that legacy, not by finding the collection, but by understanding the heart that had created it. The Matthews mansion loomed before Mia as she stood at the front steps, her grandmother's journal clutched to her chest like a shield. The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn, and her heart thundered in her chest. After their last argument, coming back felt both right and terrifying. Richard opened the door before she could knock. He looked tired, his usually perfect suit slightly rumpled. "Mia," he said, his voice soft with relief. "I wasn't sure you'd come back." "I wasn't sure either," she admitted, following him into the study where they'd spent so many hours searching through Sarah's papers. The room felt different now, less like a treasure map and more like a confession box. They sat across from each other, the heavy wooden desk between them. Mia placed Sarah's journal on its polished surface, her fingers lingering on its worn cover. "I've been reading her words," Mia began, her voice trembling slightly. "Really reading them this time, not just looking for clues about the art collection." She looked up at Richard, seeing the pain etched in the lines around his eyes. "I'm scared." "Of what?" Richard leaned forward, his hands clasped together. "Of all of this. Of you. Of what finding this collection might mean." The words tumbled out faster now. "I'm scared that once we find it, everything changes. That maybe I'm not ready for what comes after. That maybe I'm not the person my grandmother thought I was." Richard was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "You know, I was terrified too when I first met Sarah," he finally said. "Not of her, of myself, of what loving her meant when I—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "When you loved Lily," Mia finished softly. "Yes." Richard stood, walking to the window. "I've spent years wondering if I made the right choice, if marrying Sarah while loving Lily was fair to anyone. Your grandmother deserved better than a man with a divided heart. But you did love her, didn't you?" "I grew to love her deeply," Richard turned back to Mia. "Just not in the way she might have wanted, not in the way she deserved. And now I'm afraid too, Mia, afraid that helping you find this collection is just another way of trying to make up for my failures." Mia felt tears prick at her eyes. "I don't know if I can handle all these ghosts," she whispered. "Mom's anger, your guilt, Sarah's secrets. Sometimes I think it would be easier to just walk away, pretend none of this ever happened." "Would it?" Richard's voice was gentle. "Or would those questions haunt you forever?" "I don't know." Mia stood, pacing the room. "Every time I think I understand what Sarah wanted, I find another layer, another secret, another reason to doubt everything I thought I knew." She stopped at a painting on the wall, one of Sarah's landscapes that Richard had shown her weeks ago. What if finding the collection doesn't give us the answers we're looking for? Perhaps that's not what Sarah intended, Richard suggested. Maybe the collection itself isn't the point. Mia turned to face him, seeing the same uncertainty she felt reflected in his eyes. They were both lost in this maze of emotions and old wounds, both searching for redemption in Sarah's legacy. I want to understand her, Mia said, but I'm not sure I can bear the weight of all these expectations, of being the one who's supposed to make sense of everything she left behind. Richard crossed the room, stopping just short of reaching for her. You don't have to do this alone, Mia, and you don't have to do it all at once. The morning light shifted, casting new shadows across the room. Mia felt caught between two paths, one leading deeper into Sarah's mysteries, the other turning away from all of it. Both terrified her equally. I don't know what to do, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I should keep searching, or if I should just let the past stay buried. Mia's hands trembled as she opened another dusty box in Sarah's old studio. The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Inside, she found a collection of letters, tied together with a faded blue ribbon. They were addressed to Sarah, all from Lily. Her heart quickened as she began to read. Each letter revealed layers of pain and longing that made her throat tight. Lily's words were beautiful, but filled with an underlying sadness that seemed to seep through the pages. I found something, Mia called out to Richard, who was searching through another part of the room. He crossed over, his footsteps echoing in the quiet space. These are from Lily to Sarah, Mia explained, holding up the bundle. There's so much here, so much I never knew. She pulled out one letter and began reading aloud. Dearest Sarah, I watch him with you, and my heart breaks a little more each day. But I could never tell you this. Your happiness means everything to me. Richard sank into a nearby chair, his face pale. I never knew she wrote to Sarah about this. Mia continued reading through the letters, each one revealing more about the complicated relationship between the sisters. Lily loved you so deeply, she said softly, looking up at Richard. But she kept it hidden, for Sarah's sake. She was always there, Richard said, his voice heavy with memory. At family dinners, holidays, celebrations, always watching, always quiet. I never realized. But you loved her too, Mia pressed gently. Why didn't you ever tell her? Richard stood and walked to the window, his shoulders tense. Because some loves are impossible from the start. I was engaged to Sarah when I realized my feelings for Lily. By then it was too late. Mia found another letter, this one tear-stained and crumpled. Sarah, forgive me for what I'm about to tell you, she read. I've decided to leave. I can't watch anymore. I can't pretend that my heart isn't breaking every time I see them together. She left right after our wedding, Richard said quietly. Moved to Paris to pursue her art. Sarah was devastated. Did she ever come back? Once, years later. But things were different. We were all different. Richard turned back to face Mia. I loved your grandmother, Mia. Maybe not with the passion I felt for Lily, but with a steady, deep affection that grew stronger over the years. Mia set down the letters, feeling the weight of 3 intertwined lives in her hands. It must have been so hard for all of you, living with those unspoken feelings. Lily knew, Richard admitted, his voice catching. She knew how I felt about her. We had one conversation, just one, before she left for Paris. She told me she was leaving because she couldn't bear to watch her sister live the life she had dreamed of. And you let her go? I had to. I had made my choice when I married Sarah. Acting on my feelings for Lily would have destroyed everything. Sarah's happiness, our family's stability, my own sense of honor. Richard's eyes were distant with memory. Sometimes the hardest part of love is knowing when to let it go. Mia looked down at the letters scattered around her. Each one was a piece of a story she was only beginning to understand. A story of 3 people bound together by love and loyalty, sacrifice and regret. Love doesn't always follow the path we expect, Richard continued softly. Sometimes it leads us to choices that break our hearts but save our souls. Lily understood that. So did Sarah, in her own way. Mia gathered the letters carefully, feeling the weight of their shared history. Did you ever regret not choosing Lily? Richard was quiet for a long moment. I regret the pain we all went through, but I couldn't have chosen differently. Some loves are meant to remain in our hearts, unspoken and unchanged by reality. That was what Lily was to me, a beautiful possibility that could never be. Mia was arranging the newly discovered letters on her small apartment table when loud knocking startled her. She knew that aggressive pattern. Her mother. Opening the door revealed exactly what she expected. Her mother's face flushed with anger, eyes blazing with determination. Without waiting for an invitation, she stormed inside. "This has gone far enough, Mia," her mother declared, pacing the small living room. "I've been patient, trying to understand why you're letting yourself get pulled into this fantasy world of Richard Matthews." Mia took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Mom, please sit down. Let's talk about this calmly." Calmly? How can I be calm when my daughter is being manipulated by a billionaire who suddenly claims to be family? Her mother's voice cracked with emotion. "He's using you. Can't you see that? This mysterious art collection, these stories about your grandmother, it's all too convenient." "It's not convenient, Mom. It's complicated." Mia gestured to the letters on the table. "I've found proof. Letters between Aunt Lily and Grandma Sarah. They're real. This isn't some elaborate scheme." Her mother's eyes fell on the letters, and her face paled slightly. "Where did you get those?" "From the mansion. There's so much history there. Mom, things we never knew about Grandma Sarah, about Aunt Lily." Mia picked up one of the letters. "Don't you want to know the truth?" "The truth?" Her mother laughed bitterly. "The truth is that Sarah abandoned us. She chose wealth and status over her own family. And now Richard Matthews is trying to do the same thing, trying to buy your loyalty with promises of inheritance and family connections." "That's not fair," Mia protested. "Richard has been nothing but honest with me. He's shared painful memories, personal regrets. He's not trying to buy anything." "Oh, sweetheart." Her mother's voice softened with pity. "You're an artist. You see the beauty in everything, want to believe in the good in people. But the world isn't like your paintings. People like Richard Matthews don't suddenly develop consciences and search for long-lost granddaughters out of the goodness of their hearts." Mia felt anger rising in her chest. "This isn't about money, Mom. It's about understanding who we are, where we come from. Don't you ever wonder why Grandma Sarah made the choices she did?" "I lived through those choices." Her mother's voice rose again. "I watched my mother walk away from us, choose a life of luxury while we struggled. Do you have any idea what that did to me? To our family?" "But that's exactly why we need to understand," Mia insisted. "There's more to the story than we know. Grandma Sarah, Aunt Lily, Richard, they were all caught in something complicated and painful. We can't just ignore it because it hurts." Her mother sank onto the couch, suddenly looking tired. "I'm trying to protect you, Mia. This search for the art collection, these family secrets, they'll only bring you pain." "Maybe," Mia acknowledged, sitting beside her. "But I need to know. I need to understand why Grandma Sarah kept so many secrets, why she never told us about Richard, about her life with him. And I need to know who I am in relation to all of it." "You're my daughter," her mother said fiercely. "That's who you are. You don't need some wealthy man's validation or mysterious art collection to define you. Mia reached for her mother's hand. I'm your daughter, yes. But I'm also Sarah's granddaughter. And maybe it's time we all stopped running from that truth. These old grudges, this pain. It's shaped our family for too long. You make it sound so simple, her mother whispered. It's not simple at all, Mia admitted. But I'm not going to stop searching, Mom. I can't. This isn't just about an inheritance or Richard's manipulation. It's about understanding our family's story, all of it, even the painful parts. Her mother looked at her for a long moment, seeing perhaps for the first time not just her daughter, but a woman determined to uncover her family's truth. The tension in the room shifted, not completely dissipating, but changing into something more complex. I can't support this, her mother said finally, standing up. But I can't stop you either. I know, Mia replied, rising to face her. But I need to do this. It's time we all face the past instead of running from it. Mia's fingers traced the delicate patterns carved into the wooden panel, her heart racing as she recognized the same motif from Sarah's sketches. After weeks of searching, the clues had led her here, to this forgotten corner of the mansion's east wing. The afternoon sun filtered through dusty windows, casting long shadows across the faded wallpaper. The rose pattern, she whispered to herself, remembering the recurring theme in her grandmother's journals. Her hands trembled as she pressed against different sections of the panel, searching for the mechanism Sarah had described in her cryptic notes. Something clicked beneath her fingers. The panel shifted slightly, revealing a narrow gap. Mia held her breath, sliding her fingers into the space and pulling gently. The hidden door swung open with a soft creak, revealing a darkened passage beyond. She fumbled for her phone's flashlight, illuminating stone steps that led downward. The air was thick with decades of stillness, carrying the faint scent of oil paint and canvas. Mia descended carefully, one hand trailing along the cool wall for support. At the bottom of the stairs, she found another door, this one with a simple keyhole. Reaching into her pocket, she withdrew the small brass key she'd discovered inside Sarah's old paint box. It slid in perfectly, turning with surprising ease. The door opened into darkness. Mia's hand found a light switch, and suddenly the room blazed to life. She gasped, her phone clattering to the floor. Paintings, dozens of them. They lined the walls in neat rows, each one carefully preserved behind climate-controlled glass. More were stored in specialized racks that filled the center of the room. The space was massive, easily the size of a small gallery, and every inch had been meticulously organized. "Oh, Grandma Sarah," Mia breathed, moving closer to examine the nearest piece. It was a stunning portrait of a young woman with familiar eyes. Lily, she realized with a start. Her great-aunt looked radiant, captured in oils with such skill and tenderness that the painting seemed almost alive. Moving through the room, Mia discovered landscapes, still lifes, and more portraits. Each piece showed remarkable talent, a mastery of technique that left her speechless. These weren't just valuable artworks. They were windows into Sarah's soul, revealing the depth of emotion and artistic passion her grandmother had kept hidden for so long. She recognized some of the subjects. Richard in his younger years, looking handsome and pensive, various scenes from around the mansion grounds, intimate family moments captured with extraordinary sensitivity. But there were also abstract pieces that spoke of deeper emotions. Canvases filled with swirling colors that seemed to pulse with joy, grief, love, and longing. In one corner, she found a collection of self-portraits. Sarah had painted herself at different stages of life, each one revealing something new about the woman Mia had never truly known. In one, she stood proudly in her housekeeper's uniform, her expression determined. In another, she wore an elegant evening gown, but her eyes held a hint of uncertainty. Tears began to fall as Mia realized the magnitude of what she'd discovered. This wasn't just an art collection. It was her grandmother's life story, told through brush strokes and color. Every canvas represented a moment, a feeling, a secret Sarah had needed to express but couldn't share openly. A large painting at the far end of the room caught her attention. It showed a young girl sitting at an easel, her face bright with concentration as she painted. With a jolt, Mia recognized herself at age 7, the year she'd first shown interest in art. She had never known her grandmother had seen her painting, let alone captured the moment in such loving detail. Overwhelmed, Mia sank onto a nearby storage bench. The weight of discovery pressed against her chest, making it hard to breathe. All these years, Sarah had been creating this sanctuary, filling it with her art, her memories, her truth. The collection wasn't just valuable in terms of money. It was priceless because it contained the essence of who Sarah Matthews had really been. In this hidden room, surrounded by her grandmother's secret legacy, Mia finally understood. Sarah hadn't been running from her past or choosing wealth over family. She had been preserving something precious, waiting for the right moment, the right person to share it with. Mia sat across from Richard in his study, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. Afternoon light filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the antique desk between them. The discovery of Sarah's hidden art collection still felt surreal, like a dream she might wake from at any moment. "The preliminary assessment came back," Richard said, sliding a folder across the desk. "The collection's value exceeds our initial expectations." Mia's hands trembled as she opened the folder. The number on the page made her breath catch. This can't be right." Sarah had an exceptional eye for art and her own work. Richard's voice softened. "Her technique was remarkable. The market for previously undiscovered artists of her caliber is substantial." Mia stood up, pacing the length of the study. The paintings flashed through her mind, each one a piece of her grandmother's soul, carefully preserved in that hidden room. "It feels wrong," she said finally. "These weren't meant to be sold. They were private, personal." "Sarah kept them hidden, yes," Richard agreed, "but she left them to you. She trusted you to decide their fate." "But why?" Mia turned to face him. "Why me? I barely knew her." Richard's expression softened. "Because you share her passion, her gift." He gestured to the small sketchbook peeking out of Mia's bag. "She saw herself in you, even from a distance." Mia sank back into her chair, remembering the painting of herself as a child at the easel. "I can't just sell them off to the highest bidder. These paintings, they're her story, her life." "Then what would you suggest?" Mia closed her eyes, thinking of her own struggles as an artist. The constant rejection, the difficulty of making ends meet while pursuing her passion. She thought of Sarah, working as a housekeeper, hiding her remarkable talent from the world. "What if," she began slowly, "what if we could help other artists? People like Grandma Sarah, who have the talent but not the opportunity." Richard leaned forward, interest sparking in his eyes. "Go on." "A foundation," Mia said, the idea taking shape as she spoke. "We could sell the collection, but use the money to support struggling artists. Grants, scholarships, maybe even a gallery space where unknown artists could showcase their work." "Sarah would have liked that," Richard said quietly. "She always wanted to help others, even when she had little herself." Mia nodded, feeling more certain with each passing moment. "We could call it the Sarah Matthews Foundation. Make sure her name, her story, isn't forgotten." "It would be a significant undertaking," Richard cautioned. "Managing a foundation isn't simple." "I know," Mia acknowledged. "But I think it's worth it. This way, Her art can create opportunities for others who might otherwise never get the chance to pursue their dreams. Richard studied her for a long moment, then smiled. You remind me of her, you know. That same determination in your eyes. He reached for his phone. I'll have my lawyers start drawing up the paperwork. We should keep some of the paintings, Mia added quickly. The personal ones, the family portraits, her self-portraits. Those shouldn't be sold. Of course, Richard agreed. We can display them here in the mansion, where they belong. Perhaps even open a small museum section, so people can learn about the woman behind the foundation. Mia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. This felt right, using Sarah's legacy to help others while preserving the most personal aspects of her art. It wasn't about profit or prestige. It was about honoring her grandmother's passion and creating something meaningful from the secret she'd kept for so long. I think, Mia said softly, this is what she would have wanted. Not just to help other artists, but to finally have her work seen, appreciated, to make a difference. Richard reached across the desk and squeezed her hand. Sarah would be proud of you, Mia, very proud indeed. Mia sat in her mother's kitchen, surrounded by paperwork and the familiar scent of coffee. Sunlight streamed through the window, warming the scattered documents that detailed the foundation's structure. Her mother, Ellen, stood at the counter, her fingers drumming against her mug as she reviewed the mission statement. The Sarah Matthews Foundation for Emerging Artists, Ellen read aloud, her voice softer than usual. It's beautiful, Mia. Mia looked up from her laptop, where she'd been drafting grant application guidelines. You really think so? Ellen pulled out a chair and sat beside her daughter. I do, and I need to tell you something. She reached for Mia's hand. I've been wrong. About everything. Mom, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Ellen's eyes glistened. I let my own hurt, my own complicated relationship with your grandmother cloud everything. I kept you from knowing her, from understanding who she really was. Mia squeezed her mother's hand. Why was it so hard between you and Grandma Sarah? Ellen took a shaky breath. I thought she abandoned us. When she married Richard, when she seemed to choose wealth over family. I was young and hurt and too proud to see the whole picture. She wiped away a tear. But looking at these paintings, reading her journals, she never stopped thinking about us. She was trying to protect something special, Mia said softly. Her art, her love for Richard, her memories of Aunt Lily. And now you're turning it into something even more special. Ellen pulled some grant proposals closer. These guidelines you're creating, they're exactly what struggling artists need. The mentorship program, the exhibition space, the living stipend. Mia smiled, remembering her own struggles. I want to give them what I never had, what Grandma Sarah never had, until it was almost too late. They worked together through the afternoon, Ellen's experience as a social worker proving invaluable in structuring the Foundation's outreach programs. They crafted application processes, planned community workshops, and designed a support system that would help artists navigate both their creative and professional development. We should have a special category, Ellen suggested, for artists who work other jobs while pursuing their passion, like Sarah did. The Sarah Matthews Working Artists Grant, Mia agreed, typing quickly. Priority given to those who show exceptional promise but face economic barriers. As they worked, the tension that had existed between them for so long began to dissolve. Ellen shared stories about Sarah from Mia's childhood, small moments she'd previously kept to herself, memories of Sarah sketching during family gatherings, always with that faraway look in her eyes. Later that evening, they sat together in Richard's study, watching as the Foundation's website went live. The first painting to be auctioned, a stunning landscape that captured the essence of hope and perseverance, was featured prominently on the homepage. "Look," Mia whispered, pointing to the donation ticker that had just appeared. Numbers began to climb as art lovers and philanthropists around the world responded to Sarah's story and the Foundation's mission. Ellen wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "She would have loved this, you know. Not just the Foundation, but seeing us together, making something meaningful out of her legacy." Mia leaned into her mother's embrace, watching as another donation notification popped up. Each number represented a future opportunity, a chance for another artist to pursue their dreams without having to hide their talent away. "I think," Mia said, "this is exactly what she was waiting for. Not just for her art to be seen, but for her family to be whole again." The room filled with warm evening light as mother and daughter sat together, watching the numbers climb, each donation a testament to the power of art to heal, connect, and transform. In Sarah's memory, they had found not just reconciliation, but a shared purpose that would touch countless lives. The grand ballroom of the Matthews estate glittered with elegance as guests in formal attire mingled beneath crystal chandeliers. Mia stood near the entrance, wearing a simple black dress that made her feel both sophisticated and uncomfortable. Her hands fidgeted with the small clutch she carried, containing the speech she'd rehearsed countless times. "You look just like her," Richard said softly, appearing beside her in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. "Sarah always carried herself with that same quiet grace at these events." Mia smiled, touched by the comparison. "Did she feel as nervous as I do?" "Every time." Richard's eyes crinkled with warmth, but she never let it show. The room was filled with art world luminaries, wealthy donors, and local artists who had been invited to witness the launch of the Sarah Matthews Foundation. Enlarged photographs of Sarah's artwork lined the walls, each piece telling a story of hidden talent and unrealized dreams. Ellen appeared through the crowd, looking elegant in navy blue. "The presentation starts in 10 minutes, she said, squeezing Mia's hand. "The response has been incredible. We've already received pledges from 3 major galleries." Mia's heart swelled as she surveyed the room. Artists mingled with potential patrons, their eyes bright with hope. This was exactly what she'd envisioned, a space where talent could meet opportunity, where dreams wouldn't have to be hidden away in secret rooms. Richard guided them toward the podium as the crowd began to settle. The first slides of their presentation appeared on the large screen. Sarah's self-portrait, followed by images of her early sketches as a housekeeper. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, his voice carrying across the hushed room. "Tonight, we honor not just an artist, but a woman who understood that creativity burns brightest when it's shared with others." Mia stepped forward, her nervousness fading as she focused on the familiar faces in the crowd. Her mother, the Foundation's board members, young artists who reminded her of herself not so long ago. "My grandmother, Sarah Matthews, lived 2 lives," she began. "One visible to the world, and one hidden in the quiet moments between duties and obligations. Through this foundation, we ensure that no other artist has to choose between their passion and their survival." As she outlined the Foundation's programs, the grants, the mentorship opportunities, the exhibition spaces, Mia saw tears in some eyes, recognition in others. She explained how the Foundation would prioritize working artists, providing them with resources and support to pursue their craft without sacrificing financial stability. "We've already secured partnerships with 5 major galleries," she announced, and established a residency program that includes living stipends and healthcare benefits. The crowd murmured appreciatively at this practical approach to supporting artists. Richard stepped forward again, his presence steady and reassuring. "Sarah's art collection, which remained hidden for so many years, will be auctioned piece by piece. Every dollar will go directly to supporting emerging artists who, like Sarah, have stories waiting to be told. The presentation concluded with a video montage of Sarah's work, set to gentle piano music. Mia watched the faces in the crowd as they took in her grandmother's talent, the subtle use of light, the emotional depth captured in each brushstroke. As applause filled the room, Mia felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. This was more than just a charity. It was a transformation of pain into purpose, of secrets into opportunities. After the presentation, as guests circulated through the gallery section, Richard found Mia standing before one of Sarah's smaller pieces, a simple sketch of hands holding a paintbrush. "She would be proud," he said quietly. "Not just of the foundation, but of how you've brought healing to our family." Mia nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. They stood together in comfortable silence, both understanding that they had found the perfect way to honor Sarah's memory, by ensuring that other artists would never have to hide their light away. The evening continued around them, filled with promise and possibility, as Sarah's legacy transformed into something greater than either of them had imagined. The gala's energy shifted as the evening progressed, conversations becoming more intimate as guests gathered in smaller groups. Mia stood near one of Sarah's landscapes, admiring how the gallery lighting caught the subtle variations in color, when she felt a familiar presence behind her. "I remember when she painted this," Ellen, her mother, said softly. She wore an elegant navy dress that made her look years younger, though her eyes carried the weight of memories. "It was during one of the few times she invited me to visit. I was too angry to appreciate it then." Mia turned, studying her mother's face. The usual tension around Ellen's mouth had softened, replaced by something that looked like regret. "Mom, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do," Ellen interrupted, reaching for Mia's hand. "I've been holding on to hurt for so long that I almost missed seeing the beautiful thing you've created here." The gallery buzzed around them, but in that moment it felt like they were in their own private bubble. Mia noticed Richard watching them from across the room, his expression gentle and understanding. "When you first told me about Richard," Ellen continued, "I could only see the past. The way Sarah seemed to abandon us for this life." She gestured at the opulent surroundings. "But I was wrong. She never abandoned anything. She just had to keep parts of herself hidden, like these paintings." Tears welled in Mia's eyes as her mother squeezed her hand. "I wish I had known her better," Mia whispered. "We both do." Ellen's voice cracked slightly. "But look at what you've done with her legacy. This foundation, it's not just about money or art, it's about making sure no one else has to hide who they are." Richard approached them slowly, giving them space to continue their conversation. Ellen turned to him, and for the first time, Mia saw no hostility in her mother's stance. "Richard," Ellen said, "I owe you an apology. I've been unfair, letting old hurts cloud my judgment." Richard shook his head. "No apologies needed. Family is complicated. Sarah taught me that." He paused, a small smile playing at his lips. "She also taught me that it's never too late to make things right." Ellen nodded, tears spilling onto her cheeks. Without warning, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Mia in a fierce hug. Mia melted into her mother's embrace, feeling years of tension dissolve between them. "I'm so proud of you," Ellen whispered against Mia's hair. "You've taken something painful and turned it into hope for others. You're so much like her, the best parts of her." Mia held her mother tighter, remembering all the times they'd argued about her art, about her choices, about Sarah. Now, standing in this gallery surrounded by her grandmother's work and the promise of helping other artists, those arguments seemed to belong to another lifetime. Richard watched them with misty eyes, and Ellen eventually pulled back, turning to include him in their circle. "We're family," she said firmly. All of us. Sarah would have wanted that. A waiter passed with champagne, and Richard grabbed 3 glasses, handing them out. To family, he said simply, raising his glass. To healing, Ellen added. To Sarah, Mia finished. Their glasses clinked softly, the sound almost lost in the gentle murmur of the gala. But Mia heard it clearly, like a bell ringing in a new chapter of their lives. She looked around at the gathered guests, at the art on the walls, at her mother and Richard standing together without tension or anger. A smile spread across her face, warm and genuine. The path to this moment hadn't been easy, but the healing she witnessed now made every difficult step worthwhile. In her grandmother's hidden paintings and secret dreams, they had found not just an inheritance, but a way to mend what had been broken for so long. Sunlight streamed through the industrial windows of the renovated warehouse, casting long shadows across easels and work tables. Mia stood in the center of her new art studio, breathing in the familiar scent of paint and possibility. The space hummed with creative energy as several artists worked at their stations, each lost in their own artistic world. The transformation from empty warehouse to thriving artist haven had taken months of hard work. But now, seeing it alive with creativity, Mia knew every minute had been worth it. White walls displayed an ever-changing gallery of works in progress, while storage units lined one wall, filled with supplies available to any artist who needed them. That shading is really coming along, Mia said, stopping beside a young woman working on a large canvas. Jenny, fresh out of art school and struggling to make ends meet, looked up with paint-stained fingers and a grateful smile. Thanks to you, Jenny replied. I never could have afforded these materials on my own. Mia squeezed her shoulder gently. That's exactly why we're here. Moving through the studio, Mia checked in with each artist. Some were working on commission pieces, others on personal projects. All of them had been carefully selected by the Foundation's board, talented artists who just needed a chance to prove themselves. At her own workspace in the corner, Mia studied her latest piece. The canvas held sweeping strokes of color that reminded her of Sarah's style, though she hadn't consciously tried to imitate it. Something about the way the blues melted into greens, the subtle hints of gold in unexpected places. It spoke of hidden beauty, of stories waiting to be told. The studio door opened, and Richard's familiar figure appeared. He looked different here than in his usual business settings, more relaxed, his tie loosened and jacket draped over one arm. His eyes swept the space, taking in the bustling activity and vibrant artwork. This is quite something, he said, approaching Mia's workspace. When you first proposed this idea, I couldn't quite picture it, but now it's real, Mia finished, wiping her hands on her apron. Sometimes I can hardly believe it myself. Richard moved closer to her canvas, studying the painting with intense focus. You know, Sarah used to lose herself in her work, just like this. Hours would pass, and she wouldn't even notice. Mia smiled, touching a corner of the canvas where the paint was still wet. I'm beginning to understand why. There's something freeing about creating something that's entirely yours. She would have loved this place, Richard said softly. Not just the art, but what you're doing for these other artists, giving them the chance she never had. They walked together through the studio, Richard pausing to admire different pieces and chat with some of the artists. Mia watched as Jenny explained her technique, noting how Richard listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions. You've created more than just a studio, Richard said, as they reached the small office area. You've built a community. Mia glanced at the wall where she'd hung one of Sarah's smaller paintings, a piece she'd discovered in the collection that captured the essence of hope in simple brushstrokes. I think that's what she always wanted, Not just to create art, but to share it, to help others find their voice. Richard stepped closer to the painting, his expression softening. You know, I see her in your work, not just in the technique or style, but in the heart of it. The way you capture emotions, the hidden depths in every piece. It's exactly how she saw the world. Mia felt tears prick at her corners of her eyes, but they were happy tears. Really? Really, Richard confirmed, turning to face her. She would be so proud of what you've done here. Mia, you've taken her legacy and turned it into something even more beautiful than she could have imagined. Through the office window, they could see the artists at work, each focused on their own creations, each supported by the foundation Sarah's art had made possible. Mia watched them, feeling a deep sense of rightness settle over her. This was exactly where she was meant to be. The autumn breeze rustled through the cemetery trees, scattering golden leaves across the well-maintained grounds. Mia held a bouquet of white lilies, Sarah's favorites she'd learned from Richard, while her mother carried pink roses. They walked together in comfortable silence, their footsteps crunching softly on the leaf-strewn path. Sarah's headstone stood elegant and simple, just like the woman herself had been. The marble gleamed in the late afternoon sun, the engraved letters clear and sharp. Sarah Matthews, beloved wife, mother, and artist. Below, the dates of her birth and death framed a small etched paintbrush, Richard's special addition to honor her passion. I used to be so angry, Mia's mother said softly, kneeling to brush away some fallen leaves from the base of the stone. I thought she abandoned us, chose wealth over family. I never understood. Mia knelt beside her mother, carefully arranging the lilies in the bronze vase. She was protecting everyone in her own way. Richard told me she worried about how people would judge our family if they knew. Her mother touched the cool marble surface, tracing the letters of Sarah's name. She didn't need to protect us. We could have handled it. We could have been there for her. Maybe she wasn't ready for that, Mia suggested gently. Sometimes the hardest things to share are the ones closest to our hearts. They sat together on the small bench facing the grave, shoulders touching. The Foundation's latest art exhibition pamphlet peeked from Mia's bag, a showcase of emerging talents, each supported by Sarah's legacy. Her mother pulled it out, thumbing through the glossy pages. Look at all these lives you're touching, her mother said, pride evident in her voice. All because Sarah believed in the power of art. Mia leaned against her mother's shoulder, remembering the hidden room where they'd found Sarah's collection, each piece carefully preserved. She never stopped creating, even when she couldn't share it with the world. I think that's what kept her going, knowing that someday it might make a difference. Just like you're doing now. Her mother wrapped an arm around her shoulders. I'm sorry I fought so hard against this at first. I was scared of losing you, too. The sun cast long shadows across the cemetery, painting everything in soft, warm light. A gentle wind stirred the flowers they'd brought, making them dance against the headstone. Mia thought about the last few months, the Foundation's growth, the artists they'd helped, the bridges rebuilt with her mother. You know, her mother said, I dream about her sometimes. She's always painting, surrounded by light. She looks happy. Mia smiled, remembering her own dreams of Sarah. I think she is happy. Everything she kept hidden, all the art she created in secret, it's finally out in the world, helping others follow their dreams. They sat in companionable silence, watching the play of light and shadow across the grave. The anger and hurt that had once divided their family had transformed into something beautiful, a legacy of creativity, hope, and healing. I wish I had known her better, Mia's mother whispered. Really known her, not just the version of herself she thought she had to be. We know her now, Mia replied, squeezing her mother's hand. Through her art, through the lives she's touching even after she's gone. Maybe that's the best way to know someone, through the impact they leave behind. The cemetery had grown quiet, most visitors gone for the day. The flowers on Sarah's grave caught the last rays of sunlight, their petals glowing like small beacons. Mother and daughter sat together, united in their remembrance of the woman who had started them on this journey of discovery and reconciliation. Around them, the autumn day slowly faded into evening, but neither woman moved to leave. They remained on the bench, sharing memories and comfortable silences, finding peace in the presence of each other and the memory of Sarah Matthews, artist, dreamer, and bridge builder across generations. Mia stood in the center of her gallery, drinking in the quiet before opening hours. Morning light streamed through the tall windows, casting warm patches on the polished wooden floors. Her paintings lined the walls, each one a piece of her journey, a story told in color and texture. She walked slowly past each piece, remembering the emotions that had guided her brush. The first painting showed a solitary figure standing by a grave. Herself. That day she'd met Richard. The colors were muted, heavy with grief and uncertainty. Next came a series inspired by Sarah's hidden room, all secret corners and shadowed spaces brightened by unexpected bursts of color. Running her fingers along one frame, Mia paused at her favorite piece. It depicted the mansion's library, where she'd spent countless hours with Richard, learning about Sarah's life. She'd captured the warm glow of ancient reading lamps, the rich leather of old books, and the gentle atmosphere of understanding that had grown between them. "You've come so far," she whispered to herself, remembering the struggling artist who'd once doubted her every brushstroke. Now, her work filled this space, her space. The gallery wasn't just a showcase, it was a testament to healing, to growth, to the power of embracing one's truth. In one corner, she'd created a special display dedicated to Sarah. Several of her grandmother's pieces, carefully restored, hung alongside Mia's interpretations of the same subjects. It was a conversation across time, a dialogue between two women who'd found their voices through art. The Foundation's office occupied the back of the gallery, where Mia and her small team reviewed applications from emerging artists. Just yesterday, they'd approved grants for 3 promising talents. She smiled, thinking of their excited faces during the interviews. They reminded her of herself, not so long ago, full of passion but lacking opportunity. Sunlight caught the brass nameplate on her desk. Mia Matthews, director. She touched it lightly, still amazed at how natural it felt now. The scared, uncertain young woman who'd stood at her grandmother's grave seemed like a lifetime ago. Her latest work in progress sat on an easel near the window. It was larger than her usual pieces, ambitious in scope. The canvas showed a family tree, but instead of names and dates, she'd painted scenes, moments of connection, forgiveness, and love. Sarah's face emerged from the trunk, her gentle smile watching over the branches where Mia had captured snippets of their shared story. The mansion's hidden room, the first charity gala, quiet afternoons with Richard, reconciliation with her mother. Walking to the window, Mia watched the city wake up. Early morning joggers passed by, coffee shops raised their awnings, and delivery trucks made their rounds. Soon, the gallery would open its doors for another day. Art students would sketch in the corners, collectors would browse the walls, and hopeful artists would arrive with portfolios tucked under their arms. Her reflection in the glass smiled back at her, confident, peaceful, ready. She thought of all the blank canvases in her studio upstairs, waiting to capture whatever came next. There would be more stories to tell, more lives to touch through the foundation, more moments to share with her newfound family. The morning sun climbed higher, filling the gallery with golden light. It caught the edges of frames and danced across painted surfaces, bringing each piece to life. Mia felt its warmth on her face as she stood at the window, watching the world begin another day. Her heart felt full, knowing that this space, this gallery, this purpose, this life she'd built, was exactly where she was meant to be. The city stretched before her, a canvas of endless possibilities. She could see the spire of the building where she'd first displayed her work, the park where she now met her mother for weekly lunches, the cafe where she and Richard discussed foundation business over coffee. Each landmark held a memory, a stepping stone that had led her here.